Well, hey there, it's great to see you again. We're in the middle of our series here called Lies We Believe. And let me tell you something. No one can lie to us like we lie to ourselves, right? We do this every day. How about this one? I'm only going to eat one chip. Yeah, right. When's the last time that's ever happened? Or how about this one? Tomorrow, I'm going to go to the gym. Or how about this one? Hey, I'm going to Target. I just need one thing, and that's it. You come out with bags full of stuff, don't we? We all have these good intentions, and that's only one area of our lives, though, that we lie to ourselves. And so today I want to talk about the lies that we tell ourselves regarding patience, especially when it comes to waiting on God. So, what do you think about when you think about patience? Do you think about quietness, or maybe stillness, or how about this, boredom? Or some of us just think of coming in last all the time, right? Oh, I have to let somebody else in front of me in line all the time. We don't like patience. Now, we love persistence. We love the underdog story, don't we? Just a couple weeks ago, the UConn Huskies men's basketball team, they won the national championship. And one of the great stories about that was their coach, Dan Hurley. And Dan Hurley had waited a lifetime to have this kind of success. He had grown up with a family where his dad was renowned in northern Jersey in high school sports, kind of Hall of Fame coach there. And then his older brother, Bobby, won national championships in college with Duke, while Dan went to Seton Hall and didn't win anything. And he was constantly compared to his dad and constantly compared to his brother, so much so that when he was in his 20s, he literally just hated basketball. I think he even hated himself a little bit. He went through a very dark time in his life. But through persistence and through the help of many others around him, Dan Hurley continued in coaching, and then he finally had this pinnacle of success with his dad and his brother right by his side. I mean, those stories like that, they give us goosebumps, don't they? Now, persistence can be inspiring, but what if it's persistence in the wrong direction, right? Winning championships is one thing, but what about the person who stays too long at the roulette table? Or how that many of us, we know we've worked for bosses who stayed too long at their positions, right? And it just kind of ruined culture. Or how about throwing good money after bad over and over and over again in some investments or business ideas? So we have this question that we're always asking ourselves, should I persevere or should I stop? And that question takes so much wisdom, doesn't it? And sometimes we just keep going, even if it doesn't make sense. As much as we love that persistence, it can sometimes get the worst of us. Here's what I want us to learn today as we unpack this. True success is not just the persistence with our dreams, but it's the patience with God's plans. And that is so important as a follower of Jesus. So, what does the patience of God look like in our lives? So, to help illustrate, I want to take a look at two people that are found in the book of Genesis, the very first book of the Bible. Now, let's look at Abraham first. Abraham was the father of the nation of Israel, and we're introduced to Abraham in Genesis chapter 12. And where it begins by saying this, the Lord had said to Abram, leave your native country, your relatives, your father's family, and go to the land that I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I will make you famous, and you will be a blessing to others. Man, God says, I want to begin a new nation with you, but you're going to have to trust me. You're going to have to move. He starts with that. And today, we travel everywhere all the time. We go somewhere and back, and even though it's travel sometimes is frustrating, we go all over the place. But back then, though, nobody moved. Everybody pretty much stayed where they had to go unless something horrific happened, and everybody moved. So he moves away from all of his stability. He moves away from his family. He moves away from all that he knew, and here he is doing this, trusting God that he'll come through with his promise. Now, as he moves, years go by, and another area of trust and waiting and patience comes into play. Abraham has no kids to keep his family name going. And he's beginning to lose hope. It's getting frustrating. And so Genesis 15 says, "But Abram replied, 'O sovereign Lord, what good are all your blessings when I don't even have a son? Since you've given me no children, Eleazar of Damascus, a servant in my household, is going to end up inheriting all my wealth. You have given me no descendants of my own, so one of my servants is going to be my heir.'" Abraham is nervous. And so he starts trying to get creative, and he starts coming up with these scenarios and saying, "I have to make something happen here, God. Apparently you're not doing it. We've been waiting patiently for a long, long time, a decade, and nothing has happened. So here's the next plan. This is what I've devised. This is what we're going to do." But God clearly says no. And he says, "Don't lose hope. Be patient." Look what God says. "Then the Lord said to him, 'No, your servant will not be your heir, for you will have a son of your own, and he's going to be your heir.' Well, then the Lord took Abram outside, and he said to him, 'Look up into the sky and count the stars if you can. That's how many descendants you will have.'" See, God compares the present reality of having no heir to this future promise of a nation of countless people. See, God is reorienting Abram's priorities. He's saying, "My plans are always right, even if you have to be patient, even if they take time." And it is so hard to wait, isn't it? We're tempted to believe lies in the waiting room of life, aren't we? Here's where they get sideways again. Eventually, Sarah invites Abraham to sleep with her servant Hagar and have a baby with her. And so Abram goes, "You really want me to do this? Okay." And he goes forward with this. Take a look at this. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had not been able to bear children for him, but she had an Egyptian servant named Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, "The Lord has prevented me from having children." So it's God's fault. He's not coming in on time. So go and sleep with my servant. Perhaps I can have children through her. And Abram agreed with Sarah's proposal. What a dog, right? So Sarah, Abram's wife, took Hagar, the Egyptian servant, and gave her to Abram as a wife. And this happened 10 years after Abram had settled in the land of Canaan. So God gave a promise that hadn't come through to that point, so they took matters into their own hands. I mean, after all, the end justifies the means, right? Another lie that we believe. We think this way. Sometimes we think, man, I need to do something even if it's wrong. I need to make my own luck. I know it's not right, but it can really help us. And yeah, it might be a shortcut, but no one's ever going to know. I know it may be wrong, but hey, we're in love. God wouldn't want us to be alone. So this decision that Abraham makes is devastating. Sarah gets jealous. Hagar ends up being exiled. And eventually, Sarah does have a baby. And that baby becomes the beginning of the Jewish nation of Israel. Hagar's son becomes the father of all the Arab nations. And the rest, as they say, is history. We know of all the infighting and conflict of the Middle East to this day. So one more story. Joseph, he's found in Genesis as well. So at 17 years old, he has a dream. Now this is found in Genesis 37. It says this: "One night Joseph had a dream, and when he told his brothers about it, they hated him more than ever. 'Listen to this dream,' he said. 'We were out in the field tying up bundles of grain, and suddenly my bundle stood up, and your bundles, they all gathered around, and they bowed low before mine.'" Now, time out. If you have dreams where your siblings are bowing down to you, you better keep those kinds of dreams to yourself, especially if they're adults and you're a teenager. So the brothers, they're incensed, and they want to even murder him. This is ancient days. Things were rough back then. But instead, they sell him into slavery. So awful. So he becomes a slave in the nation of Egypt. He'd never been there before. He was forgotten and nameless there. He became a slave to Potiphar for 11 years. Now, up came for his life a shortcut moment as well with Potiphar's wife. She wants Joseph to sleep with her. And here's what Joseph says with that dilemma in Genesis 39:9. He says, "No one here has more authority than I do." He had risen to the ranks of authority just under Potiphar. He says, "He has held back nothing from me except you, because you're his wife. How could I do such a wicked thing? It would be a great sin against God." Long story short, she was not happy with that response. She frames Joseph for attempted rape. Joseph loses his position. Not only that, he's thrown into prison with no rights of his own. He's moved further away from his dream. So this has been going on for 11 years, and he's moving further and further from this dream he had as a teenager. This is what we call patience. See, honoring God along the way, even if it takes longer and requires even more faith in our lives. So when we believe the lie that the end justifies the means, like Abraham and Sarah did, that ultimately ends in regret. We always need to remember this, so important: God's plans never violate his principles. So, those are a couple interesting events that took place in past history. So how does this play out for someone like you or me in these days today? Well, you hear us saying similar things. Hey, God would want me to be happy. He doesn't want me stuck in this loveless marriage. And so, maybe I need to just exit this thing. I was just visiting with one of my sons, and he was saying that he's got a lot of coworkers who are older than him that would love to retire, but they can't retire because they were divorced in their 50s and they don't have enough money for retirement. So they're working into their 70s. In the moment in their 50s, thought it was a great idea. Now as they enter their 70s, lots of regret. It reminds me of what Paul wrote to the Ephesian church. He said, look, always be humble and gentle. Be patient with each other, making allowance for each other's faults because of your love. Hey, if your marriage is suffering a little bit these days, put some work into it. Be patient with each other. Think the best of one another and work together. And sometimes you have to bring in a therapist to help you do that, or a loving church to come around you to help you with that. But stay together and work this out. Or how about, this is popular today, sex within the boundaries of marriage. Nobody wants to wait for that anymore. And we say things like, hey, doesn't God want me happy? So what do? We move in together. We start living together before we're married because, hey, it makes sense economically, makes sense financially. Culture accepts it. But did you know that living together is practicing false commitment with each other? And it's researched backed. This is so important. Secular research even says that there is a higher divorce rate related to people who live together before marriage than those who don't, because your whole marriage is based on a lack of trust. So 1 Corinthians 6:18 goes back to these truths. Run from sexual sin. No other sin so clearly affects the body as this one does. For sexual immorality is a sin against your own body. In other words, purity paves the way to intimacy in your relationship. Let's turn the page to business. You could cut some corners. Maybe you have to step on people on the way up. Hey, that's just the way of the world, we say, right? But the truth is, as Paul writes, he says, so let's not get tired of doing what's good. At just the right time, we'll reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up. Well, let's talk about friendships. We all want more friends, especially after the isolation of the pandemic. We're looking for good friends. Well, God wants you in community. He wants you with good friends, but not if these friends help you violate his principles. So choose your friends wisely. Solomon writes thousands of years ago this truth: walk with the wise and become wise. Associate with fools and you're going to get in trouble. Or how about this? When you're hurt by somebody, it's very natural for us to just want to hurt them back. We want revenge. And listen, revenge makes for a great action movie, right? But it does not make for the way that God wants us to live our lives. The scriptures say, vengeance is mine, says the Lord. I'll repay. You don't keep that kind of score. And then finally, how about finances, right? Our world today, the lie is, hey, you spend first, you save if you have any left over, and if you have still anything left over, which you probably don't, you can give some of that away. That is completely backwards to the truth, and that's why normal is broke. We give first, we save, and then we spend and we live within our means. Hey, Joseph, he was a slave for 11 years. He gets tossed into prison for 2 years. He eventually stands before Pharaoh to interpret a dream that nobody could figure out. So this man, Joseph, goes from a dream at 17 to interpreting a dream 13 years later. And he interprets the dream. He's instantly promoted to second in the command of the kingdom. In Genesis 41, it says, when he had, this is talking about Pharaoh, then he had Joseph ride in the chariot reserved for his second in command. And wherever Joseph went, the command was shouted, kneel down. Sound familiar? So Pharaoh put Joseph in charge of all of Egypt. You know, this reminds me of a principle that I've heard before. God can do more in one moment than we can do in decades of our life. So we fast forward his story to 8 years into the future, and guess what? Even his brothers, they travel from Israel to Egypt because they're in need of food, and they kneel down before him, not knowing who he was initially, receiving food to help sustain their family and protect the eventual nation of Israel. Joseph says who he is. They're afraid that he's going to kill them, and he forgives. And he says God had a plan the whole time. You know, you think about patience. Think about patience in food. We've all had food that's better the next day. You know, my wife, she makes this white chicken chili. And man, I am so tempted right when she makes it, I want to eat it. And sometimes I do. And it is amazing. But if you let that sit overnight and you heat that up the next day, those flavors meld, they marinate together, and that white chicken chili becomes so much better because good things come to those who wait. So, where do you struggle with patience? What is it? You know, what's that lie that makes you not be patient? Is it a fear of missing out? Is it keeping up with the Joneses? They bought something, we have to. True success, guys, remember, it's not just the persistence with our dreams, but it's the patience with God's plans. And God's plans never violate his principles. So wait on God because God is faithful. Yeah, I want to end our time together simply by reading a psalm that I hope will speak to you. This psalm is like a prayer. It can be our prayer together when it comes to our relationship with God and patience. Here, it's Psalm 37. It says this, be still in the presence of the Lord and wait patiently for him to act. So God, help us to do that. Don't worry about evil people who prosper or fret about their wicked schemes. God, I don't want to keep up with culture all the time. I don't want to keep up with the Joneses all the time. God, I want to keep up on your plan. Stop being angry. Turn from your rage. Do not lose your temper. It only leads to harm. So God, help me to be patient with people. And he says, for the wicked will be destroyed, but those who trust in the Lord, they will possess the land. God has a promise for you. He wants you to be patient with his timing. He's forming you. He's building you. He's developing you. And at just the right time, he's doing a work for you that you'll reap from that. So let's let that be our prayer here today, that we will patiently, with wisdom, wait on God. So God, help us develop our patience today.